All right, guys, it's the top of the hour. As people come in, we're just going to let them, but we're going to go ahead and get started. This webinar is going to be recorded. So if you signed up for this, if you're on it, you're going to get a recording after and you can share with your team. So for starters, I want to welcome everyone. I am Jen Lyles. I'm Executive Director of Beauty Schools Marketing Group. And you might know our #1 product, which is Beauty Schools Directory. We help schools get leads. And I want to welcome our co-panelist today, which is Anthony Civitano. Welcome.
Hi, Jan. Hi, everybody.
And tell us a little bit about you and your experience. I know that you were a former school owner and just want to give everyone some context before we start our conversation.
Sure. Well, I've been in the beauty industry pretty much my whole life. I'm a second-generation hairdresser and school owner. I sold my schools in 2018. I had 8 schools in New York and Florida in both skincare, hair and nails and makeup. I was executive director of the New York State Beauty School Association for over 15 years, sat on the board of AACS for 13 years, and most recently was the interim executive director of AACS for 6 months while we transitioned and sold the building in Arizona and went virtual.
And that's where I met Anthony, was at AACS. I used to work years ago for AACS. He actually sat on the board of directors. So we've known each other for a really long time, and we're really excited to have him today. For starters, our monthly webinars are for BSD members only, but I'm going on vacation today. I'm in a really good mood. So I was just like, whatever, I'm just gonna let everyone in. So if you are not a BSD member, welcome. And in the future, would love for you to get leads from us, or at least hear about our directory and things that have changed. Anthony is a big fan of BSD himself and used it back when he owned schools. Isn't that right, Anthony?
I was, absolutely.
All right, that's actually, it's a good pivot, because what we're going to be talking about today is benchmarks. I know a lot of schools goal set, right? Like, we have ideas in our head with how many people we want in our schools. And there are things you need to do along the way to get there. And we're going to be talking today about goal setting. What is a proper benchmark for your admissions team, for your marketing team? How many leads do you really need to be getting? What kind of sources should you be using to get these leads? And then what should you expect out of your admissions reps? So we're going to get into a conversation today, open dialogue, talking about these things. If you have comments or if you have questions, pop them in the chat and we're going to get to them throughout. This, again, is just a really kind of open conversation, open dialogue, and we're going to see where it goes. So for starters, Anthony, you have a lot of, I wasn't in the beauty school business back in the day when you owned schools, but I would love to know the history. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of beauty schools and how you guys used to get students?
Yes, well, Jen, when you were in kindergarten, I was a school owner.
Yeah, sure.
So our #1 way of always getting leads was, and still is to this day, I feel, is referrals, right? Mm-hmm. So that's your best, I shouldn't say it's the #1, but it's the best way to get a great lead and convert really easy. So what we used to do is what you want to know first?
Yeah, because before, I mean, this is before internet, right? People weren't Googling schools. Yeah. So what were the ways, what were the sources y'all would use to fill your schools?
So the #1 thing that we always made sure we did was we created our community. And our community was salon owners, salon employees, professionals. Believe it or not, the salespeople from our distributors were a great resource for us as well. We made sure that, and this goes back to the core value of your school, is that everybody's happy and everybody has that school spirit. So everybody, from your students to your staff to your janitor, should be ready to talk about the school. And it's not that they're selling for you, but it's that they're giving the experience that is within your school. Mm-hmm. So I would always say, like, if you're at the bank and somebody says, comments on your hair or your outfit, or you comment on their hair or your outfit, you should then follow up with, hey, I'm a hairdresser, or I'm in school to be a hairdresser, or an SE, or whatever it may be, a nail tech, and always comment and then start the conversation about it and express how wonderful our industry is, because we all want people to come in. And it's not so much about selling for the owner or anything like that. It's just the model that you want your staff and your students to exude, because they should be happy and proud that they're in the beauty industry. So that was a really huge way that we did it. It was really, I mean, it takes a lot, because it's all about, like I said, the community that you have within your school.
That being said, today everything has shifted, so toward digital, and we're gonna talk about that and what expectations should be. But because everything is digital, Anthony, I feel like people are missing that old school mentality of creating the community and making sure you have a good relationship with high school counselors, with local salons, and then creating your students, giving them a culture where they can be like mini walking advertisements for you.
Right. Yeah. Shadow days were a great way of doing things as well too, where you would invite some students that were about to graduate high school, have them come in and get to see and experience a day in the school as well.
Yeah,
that was always a really cool way of doing things.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about goal setting and the way of what you expected as an owner out of your admissions. Because I will tell you, I'm new school. I actually have new expectations for people. But did you used to have like a lead to tour rate, a show rate for tours? Like you expected 40% of the people to show up and 20% of those to enroll. Did you have set numbers?
Yes. So when I got into the business working for my father and his partners, we followed a very strict regimen of 50, 50, 50. It was, so if we had 100 leads, we were expected to set 50 appointments. If we had 50 appointments set, we had to have 50 show up for the, 25 show up for the appointment.
Okay.
And then 12 and a half enroll from that. So it was always 50, 50, 50. And then we would drop down from enroll to start. We always left a 10% wiggle room. You would always lose one or two due to financing, or maybe they didn't have a proper documentation, but it wasn't for lack of being, and I hate to say this, but it's important, because it's important that you realize you still are selling, is that you did close them. Your admissions rep did what they were supposed to do. They saw a need in somebody that wants to get an education. You show what they provide, and then you're closing it, right? You're closing that deal. Yeah. It's kind of it's a really tight line, because we're not allowed to sell education, but that's the reality of it, is that we are selling education. We're selling,
you are sales, admissions,
and we're selling the career.
Yeah, absolutely. Financial aid, they're closers. If you missed it last month, I did a webinar with Sarah Holmes, who works for Advanced 360, and it was on improving your start rate. And so a lot of people are good at like getting people to sign on the dotted line. And then there are some schools where only 70% of them show up on the first day of school. That is not okay. And if you need tips in that area, reach out to me via email and I will send you a recording to that webinar. But when we talk about that shift in digital, what did you notice? I'm sorry, Anthony. Is it not a good?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Apologize.
That's totally fine. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the shift in digital. When you were a school owner and you saw that, were the leads just sort of flying in for you guys? Or was that like a slow build because people were starting to figure out the internet?
No, it was very much a slow build. Yeah. So, and that's actually how I got introduced to beauty school directory.
Okay.
Was like, I literally opened my first school in 1999. I worked before that in my dad's schools, but I remember buying my first .com. I bought Wilfred.com because that was my school, was the last Wilfred Beauty School, which was the largest chain of schools in the country at one time. Okay. Little side note, I actually sold that .com for $25,000 a year later. So it was pretty cool. But It was very cool. But so now the internet was the Wild West. Nobody knew anything. Everybody was buying up names. This was literally when Coca-Cola wasn't even bought yet, like Coca-Cola.com.
Yeah.
Like, people were able to buy that. So, but
Yep.
now I had a website. I built a website, which back then cost $50,000 to build. And pay-per-click wasn't a thing yet. I didn't, nobody knew what any of that was. And that's when I was introduced to Beauty School's directory.
Mhm.
And they were able to really, really cultivate our lead flow. And, it was buying up keywords back then and trying to figure out what was relevant and how searches worked. The reality is that none of it was anything that I knew how to do. None of my colleagues knew how to do it. And I still believe to this day that none of us know how to do it. We all think we have sound bites and we all can speak somewhat intelligently about it. But the reality is that we have no clue what we're doing.
The reality is that it changes all the time. And that now the market is so oversaturated with digital media that schools don't know where to start. So this is where I want to start talking a little bit about what is going on today and what y'all should be focusing on. For starters, I want to explain the difference between traditional and non-traditional media. Okay, traditional is just indirect marketing. We're talking TV, radio, bus ads, bench ads, anything where you don't know who's going to walk by it and you hope that it resonates with someone. And traditional is still done in several markets. I am pro it for brand awareness. I am pro traditional. If you have a huge budget and you have 50 schools, all over the West Coast, and you're going to take out billboards, sure, yeah, you do that. That should be a portion of your budget if your budget's big enough. And then we have non-traditional, we have digital media. And this is where schools, I believe, should be focusing most of their marketing budget toward. We're talking Google ads, social ads, and Beauty School's directory. You'd be crazy not to use it, just because no matter what market you're in, if you type in cosmetology school near me, Beauty School's directory shows up on page 1 every single time. And 90% of BSD leads never come to your school website. 90%. You're talking about people who chose to go to a directory. And just like how maybe you would go to Yelp to find a restaurant tonight to go with your spouse, you're not going to 50 different websites to check out the menu. You're going to Yelp. You're going to a directory. There are a lot of people who do that. We have over 1 million visitors a year who come to BSD to do that specifically to look for a school. So that is one bucket of that source. BSD should not be the only thing you do. Google shouldn't be the only thing you do. Social shouldn't be the only thing you do. It needs to be all of them. So another way schools can get leads other than paid is just their own website. You need to have a lead form on the homepage of your website. That's going to be your #1 generator for leads. Referrals. Anthony talked about referrals. How easy is it to enroll a referral versus a Google lead? I mean, come on, Ann. Like it's not even close. So tell me a little bit about referrals and how you would get your students to recommend.
So it started really, I would always say that the student's first day and the last day is the most important 2 days of the student's education, right? Because the first day is their first impression and the last day is how they're going to remember everybody. But the reality is that you have to give a quality education these days. The days of being able to just open your doors and have bodies come through, which there was a time when that did happen. You have to work at these referrals. You have to make them understand that it's for the greater good. Your staff, your employees, everybody. I used to say that it takes a village to graduate a hairdresser, right? Because we all do. Every instructor needs to be a strong link in that person's journey through their education. The admissions rep, the financial aid rep, the director, the bursar, the everybody in there. So it's part of cultivating that student to feel good about your school. Because so often they look at it like I'm in jail because I'm here for 1,200 hours or 1,300 hours, whatever it may be. And instead of counting down their lessons or their days to graduate and start their beauty career, they're counting down their hours like they're in prison.
Yep.
So you need to combat that so that they have a very good feeling. And then when they're out there and they're successful, and somebody says, "Hey, Jen, where did you go to school? I want to have the same career as you." That student isn't, or that graduate isn't going to say, "Go to any beauty school." They're going to say, "Go to see Anthony at blah, 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 blah."
Yeah.
So it's about showing and caring that every student, you have a vested interest in their success, and it will translate through. And that's how you get those referrals.
And unpopular opinion, don't during orientation say, "All right, everyone, who do you know? Let's inspire a friend." Oh my gosh, that's so
we do it in
embarrassing.
admissions.
Listen, when you are asking people to send people to you before they even tried out your school, I think it's embarrassing, and I think you come off desperate.
Oh yeah,
and I would be mortified if I were at a restaurant and before they gave me my meal, they said, "Could you go on Google and leave us a review and tell everyone how great it was?" Are you effing kidding me? Like, that is so desperate. Do not do that. And schools have been doing this for years. And I've seen it firsthand. We cannot expect that. You know, when I was a trainer, I did this portion where I would say, "Let's find the holes in your school. I'm gonna put up a stat and you tell me what's wrong with your school." And so whenever I did the one that last year we had 49 referrals. And then this year we had 26. What's the problem? And almost every time people would get it wrong. Their answer was usually, "We're not asking for them." No, that's not the correct answer. The correct answer is, you have a culture problem. Your school should be so freaking amazing. You don't have to ask students. You don't have to ask people to come to your school. Right. We are living in a generation of narcissists and social media where we are sharing everything about ourselves online. Everything. Oh my gosh, check out this hair hack. Check out this. Look at my eyelashes. Look at this Shein haul I did. If anyone's on TikTok, it is all about check out what I'm doing and you should copy me because I'm a pro. You don't think if someone took out 20 grand to your school, they're going to try to brag about that and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm at this and I'm learning this and I'm having so much fun and I'm sharing about my journey every day." You should never have to ask for a referral.
Right. That's what I was getting at with building that community, making sure that everybody's happy all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
It's really a vested interest.
Yeah. So if your referrals aren't going up, you need to make school more fun. You need to make it a place that people want to be, that they're inspired, that they want to tell all their friends about it. And I have talked to a few schools in this past year where they've actually lowered their marketing budget tremendously because their referrals are up so much. Like, could you imagine just like investing in the culture of your school to now where you don't have to spend 50 grand, 20 grand a month on marketing. You can spend half that because you're getting so many students from referrals. That should be the goal to me of every school. Social media, another really great way to get leads, right? You can run Facebook ads and on Instagram. I want to talk a little bit about events, and then I'm going to get into concrete numbers. I want to talk about actual benchmarks for admissions and marketing and what you should be looking at. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about events because they're dying. So Anthony, did you guys used to like go do high school visits, high school career fairs, that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we did career fairs.
Was that beneficial for you guys?
You know, it goes back to kind of who I sent. If I went and I had the energy and I explained and I made it fun and exciting, then yeah, it was great. If I sent somebody that just sat there behind a booth waiting for somebody to go from the Army recruiter to the Navy recruiter to the Harvard recruiter, then to me, and there, you know, it wasn't that great. I always tried to have a video going on. I would always put a mannequin out there so they can come over and touch their hair, because that's what really gets them. They don't want to just read a brochure. They want to come over, and maybe I would do a braiding, like a 5-minute braiding class for them.
Love it.
And have it going, you know. So it would be more than just sitting there.
I mean, if I'm today a beauty school and I'm going to a high school fair, just like what you said, you've got to make it fun. I would have a ring light. I would have like a salon chair sitting there, like, or like a high chair. And I would say, like, who wants to be in our TikTok, and do like a 30-second hairdo, like a braid, a waterfall braid, or a bubble braid, or just something where you're showing like a hack, and you're making it fun. You're putting it on TikTok. You have the ring light, or just tell people, like, come take a selfie here, just to attract, because that is who's going to school today. These are people who are the YouTube generation. You know, they're looking at tutorials online. That's why they're coming to school, because they grew up doing that. And they want to be a beauty influencer. That's something we didn't hear 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. People weren't coming in saying, I want to be an influencer for a brand. They're coming to school today, though, saying that. So we should be changing our presentations.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what you said at the beginning. Okay, let's talk about benchmarks. I loved your 50-50-50 thing. And the reason I loved it is because in the end, it gave a 12% conversion rate. Okay, let's talk conversion rate. Your conversion rate for your rep is how many leads they got to how many became a student. Okay, so for every 100 leads, Anthony would expect 12 of those to become a student. I think that's a really great benchmark. Today, conversion rates are a little higher, and I'll tell you why. It's because less people are filling out forms. Like back in the day, do you ever like go to a mall, Anthony, and be like, oh, there's a red car in the center, I'm going to give him my information? Like, I would freaking never do that today. I would never. I will see a car and be like, I'll buy my own car. Like, I'm not getting on another email list. Right? Like, I'm not giving someone my information. That is what's going on today. Less people are filling out lead forms. That means when someone does fill out a lead form, they're a good lead. They're a better lead than they were 5 years ago. They're a better lead. And so if your reps can't convert at 15%, they need training. That's my personal opinion. I think everyone should be above 15%, just because the people who fill out forms should be better leads. And I'm not talking about 15% in every source. I'm talking about collectively. Okay. BSD is going to convert lower. That's like a 3 to 5%. Your own website leads, that's probably more like a 20%. Referrals are usually 50 to 75%. So I'm talking about like an average for every 100 leads you get, you should have at least 15 of those enrolled. So let's do the math backwards. This is how you fill your schools. Let's monthly starts. Anthony, I'm assuming you used to have a goal for how many people you wanted to start per month.
Yeah, it varied from school to school, location to location, urban, rural, suburban.
Yep, right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's where you start. Okay, we're going to work backwards. You're going to start with, this is how many people I want at my school. To get there, you need to figure out what your rep conversion rate is. If it's 15% and you need 15 starts, then you know you need 100 leads. That right there is starting to work backwards. Okay. So I have my goal, I have my conversion, and now I know if I need to reach 15 starts, I need 100 leads based on my current conversion rates. Now it's all about the math. How do I get those 100 leads? And they should come from a variety of sources. So that's where you guys need to be deciding, okay, I need to be spending money online on PPC. I need to be making sure I'm counting my referrals. Maybe we're going into high schools. And then on top of that, maybe we're buying some BSD leads, like 40 a month or something like that. So you need to be making sure you are giving your reps enough leads to meet that goal. And what I am finding, and Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, you talk with a lot of school owners, is they just throw out numbers. They're just like, I want 20 starts every month. Oh, 30 would be great. Instead of really looking at like, is that even possible in our market? And am I even spending enough money to give them that many leads to enroll?
It's funny that you say that. So I think that the school owners today are much more business savvy than when I started out or when my dad did. I think that we just opened up to just open up and we figured one day we'll turn a profit, but it's impossible to live that way in these days. And I remember at a very young age saying, what's your profit on every graduate? What's your profit on every student? How do you figure out what you need to keep the doors open? And I got to be honest with you, still to this day, I have yet to meet more than a handful of school owners that can give me a straight answer, or at least a plan to get to some scenario. They just, it's unfortunate that I don't know if you saw the movie King Richard, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So that's the reality of it. You know, I see that now more. It's probably that I'm not a school owner anymore, but I see some of that. If you don't look at your cost and what you need to keep those doors open, you're just shooting in the dark. And I always say that our industry is like steering a ship. Like, we know that in the fall we have to pivot this way. It's a big enrollment time for us, and then Christmas and the holidays come and it goes to a lull. Then the new year comes and you have new resolutions and people are enrolling, and then the spring and the summer come and nobody wants to go to school in those times. Yep. You need to know on those off months what you need to keep those doors open. Because if you don't have a great fall or a great winter start, you know, that really affects the rest of your year. So it's those off months, you really need to know what you need to enroll and what you need to graduate.
And that means knowing what you need to spend. And so a big mistake that happened during COVID was lots of schools just paused their budget. Oh my gosh. And then they started back up and they're like, all right, guys, we need to make up for those lost enrollments. We need 40 enrollments this month instead of 20. And okay, great. Are you doubling your marketing budget to help your team get those leads? I mean, it kills me when I've gone and done boot camps with schools and I see what their goals are and they're spending $2,000 a month in marketing. How do you expect your team to enroll if you can't give them leads?
Well, that's the thing. They just go back to their ad rep and say, you're not doing the right thing, or you're pressuring them. Yeah, I agree. I'd rather spend more money and really flood them with leads.
Absolutely. Everything you can do. And so, yes, are some admissions people failing? You know, are some of their conversion rates not great because they need training, or maybe they're not a salesperson? It's possible. But if you're not meeting your goals, you need to see how much you're spending and make sure you're spending enough to get leads. I want to talk about something I'm really sick of these days. I feel like I'm being kind of like rude. Like, I'm really happy. I'm a happy-go-lucky person. I'm just like a little passionate about this because I think I've worked with so many schools where I just see them doing so many things wrong, and it kills me when an owner or a director beats up admissions when I'm just like, oh my gosh, you're not spending enough money in marketing. This isn't fair. So I'm sorry if I'm coming off a little sassy. I want to talk about cost per enrollment. Anthony, you and I have talked at length about cost per enrollment, but what you tell me is, Jen, no one knows what that is and people aren't savvy enough. So I want to hear your perspective from an owner before we get into the formulas.
Yeah. So, I mean, you just think of how regulated we are and how crazy things are. It's like when you add something else in, I'll never forget you talking about it. You're like, what's your cost per enrollment to people? And I'm like, I know they don't know it. They don't even know how to calculate that. And it's not a slight on anybody. No. It's just like, you're not really thinking of that when you start the journey to be a beauty school owner. You're not thinking, what's my cost per enrollment? What's my, cost of goods sold, or this or that. So I think it's really important that I think it's great that you're giving webinars like this, because these are really big determining factors on what your success is going to be. Because otherwise you're just pissing money into the wind, excuse my language. But if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to pivot and move things around and what it actually means, how do you know where you're going if you don't know how you get there?
I mean, if you were to own a store, Like you are only successful by looking at your ROI, like that, or any sort of retail, like everything is your ROI, right? Like how much money am I putting into this and how much am I getting back? And that is why I talk about cost per enrollment. Here's what I'm sick of. I am sick of schools being so obsessed with cost per lead. Shoot me. I'm literally so sick of it. I'm sorry. Do you want 700 leads that where 0 people are interested in your school? Or do you want 100 leads where like 70 of them are interested in your school? Wouldn't you prefer less leads that are better quality than a whole crap ton? Because if you just want a bunch of names, go to a mall and say win a free iPad and like, you know, try to get as many names as possible and then try to talk those people into going to school. Guaranteed none of them will. It's not a game about cost per lead. It's about cost per enrollment. So let's talk about that. Cost per enrollment is calculated by how much money you spend on marketing. How much money you spend marketing your school. So I want you to take your marketing budget. How much are you spending on PPC, social ads, BSD, whatever, and then divide that by how many starts you get. That gives you your cost per enrollment. And a good goal for cost per enrollment, I always say, is anything under $1,500. $1,000 is great. Anything under that, you're gravy. A good like suggestion is 10% or under of whatever your tuition is. Okay. So if your Cosmo tuition's 20 grand, it should cost you no more than $2,000 to get that student. If your SD tuition is, it would probably be like half that, like $10,000. You want to stay around $1,000 or under. What I'm finding with BSD, and we just did this calculation because sorry to get it like on a BSD tangent with this, but BSD does not convert as high. Right? Like your website converts at 20%, let's say 15, 20%. Our leads convert at like 3 to 5%. But when you do the math, the cost per enrollment is like $200, $400, $700. It's well under $1,000 for pretty much every school we work with. And I'm thinking you need to be less concerned about the conversion and you need to be looking at the big picture. I spent this much money. I spent $200 to get an enrollment. Like that's $400 to get an enrollment, or even $1,000 to get an enrollment. That is good ROI. Why is no one looking at cost per enrollment, Anthony? I don't want to say no one. I mean, I know a lot of savvy people are, but why aren't more people looking at that?
I just don't think that they know. I think, and it's changed a lot, but beauty school owners are traditional. Hairdressers, SDs that want to give back to the industry, all these grandiose, beautiful, lovely things. And they're not always the best business people, right?
Yeah.
Or they did really well as a salon because their talent showed through and then they hired the right people and they're bringing more people in. Like when you get to a school business, it's really such a different animal, such a different business. And I don't think that the education is there. It's because it's not, you're not graduating from Wharton Business School and going to open up a beauty school. Not saying that I'm a former school owner. So
yeah,
there's just learning curves that come, and you're half the time you're either trying to stay open or succeed. Like we just got a question from a new school owner, or you're a seasoned school owner that's been around forever, and you're just trying to stay open because you feel like you're being attacked by the feds or competition or whatever it may be, or deregulation. There's so much to worry about that I don't think it's not at the tip of your tongue. It's almost that build it and they will come mentality.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I think it's great that we have these people on this right now, because it's probably thought provoking to everybody on the video right now saying, wow, I do need to look at this.
Yeah, we need to look, because if something is not giving you, money back, it doesn't make sense to do it. And this is why I like digital, because you can track it. Like I know how much money I spent on digital and then how many Google leads I got. You know very clearly from BSD reports how many BSD leads you got, and then how much you paid for that, and then how many of those enrolled. You can't do that with a billboard. Like you can't do that with your radio ad. That is brand awareness. And the only way really to measure that is to take down your billboard and see if your leads tank, then you know that was part of it. But I mean, you do indirect media like that. And it's such like you could ask people, right? Like you could say, how did you hear about us? They're probably going to say, I Googled you or a friend, not even saying the fact that they drove by your billboard every day for, 2 months and just, it was subconscious. Like they're not going to say that in the interview. So I just think that's a poor way to see if your traditional media works. There's a question in the chat, and I love that this was brought up because I want to talk about realistic expectations. I have been talking to lots of new schools lately. Anthony, you and I have talked about that. There are people out there, there's a couple consultants out there pushing salons, a salon owner or someone just behind the chair just to open up a school. Oh my gosh, it's going to be so easy. You're going to get so much money. You're going to become a millionaire because you're going to get all this money from all these people who get FAFSA. Just put in your time. We need to talk about this because this is a serious issue. It's not that easy. It's hard. In fact, those conversion rates I talked about the 15%, that's if you have financial aid. If you have financial aid, for every 100 leads that come in, 15 should enroll. If you don't have financial aid, it's even harder for you.
Yeah.
So before I give you advice on that, Anthony, I would love to hear, before I answer that question, I want to hear your advice to new people who are thinking of opening up a school or have opened up a school and thought it would be easier.
So I think you're right on the money, setting realistic expectations. But I think even more so, something that you need to do before you're able to jump into that financial aid pool, if you will, is create short programs. Create programs where you can have cash flow that are affordable to people. Partner with local community, high schools that don't have their own program to bring in students, maybe at a lower fee. I can go on for hours about that. You're in an uphill fight. That's the reality of it. That doesn't mean you should be discouraged and not do it. It just means that you have to learn how to sustain. You have to learn how to stretch your dollars and bring in cash flow as much as you can. I would be here far too long to tell you, everything that I think you could and should do and really have to do. But can I just indulge me on one thing? It's funny that you talked about indirect marketing before.
Yeah.
When I first started, we would run TV commercials all the time, and I would have the call sheet of when the TV spots were going to go off, right? And I knew my reps would be by the phone waiting like this, and the phones would just start ringing. They would light up. And then we thought, like, these leads aren't good. These are people that are sitting home on their ass watching TV. And then they're like, oh yeah, maybe I should go to beauty school. So we hadn't done TV marketing for probably about 3 years. Do you know that our competitors did, and our leads for TV from TV only dropped about 25%. You're asking me how that happened? It's because I would say, how did you hear about them? Oh, yeah. I just saw you on TV.
Oh.
They didn't see us on TV. They saw a beauty school on TV.
Isn't that funny?
And then they opened up, back then it was the Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
There was no internet, or they would just pass us and say, I saw them on TV, that must be them. I saw a beauty school on TV, that must be them. I saw a billboard, or I heard a radio commercial. And it was funny because we hadn't done TV for years, and we were still getting TV leads.
That's hilarious. You know what's funny about that is that, so, Beauty Schools Marketing Group is owned by Throughline Marketing, and Throughline has a transportation division. And I went to a trucking school in Arizona a few months ago, and there was this giant billboard right in front of their school of their competitor. Or their competitor that said, like, trucking school, like turn here, like basically come around the corner and turn here. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so rude. And I told the owner, I was like, I cannot believe your competitor bought that billboard and put that there. And this is what the owner said. He's like, oh, I own that billboard. I let them put that up there because every time they get a tour, they drive by and they think we are that school. So they come into my parking lot and they just are a walk-in and they're like, I'm here for a tour. We're like, cool, we'll tour you around. They're like, we steal their students daily. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, how many times, is that the case though, where your competitors, and it is good. It's good that your competitors spend money on marketing because it gets people in your area thinking about beauty school. And most people shop 2 to 3 schools anyway. So if your competitor is spending money on marketing, that can be a really good thing for you.
It is a very good thing. I want you to think about something else. When you go to shop for a car or furniture, there's usually a section in a town or a highway that has multiple car dealerships or has multiple furniture stores. Or if you go to a gas station, there's usually one on every corner compiled right with each other. That's not by accident. They do that because that creates a buzz and then it creates competition.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Don't be afraid if somebody moves into your market. I was never afraid of that.
I think that's great. So let's then get back to that question where if you're a new small school with low budget, how do you gain more leads? The first thing you do is you need to have a lead form on your website. And I'm looking at some of these new school websites that people put up and there's not a lead form. There's a contact form and that's different. And so you don't want a contact form. You want to get more information about my school. You want to have a lead form on your home site, preferably at the top. And then see what it looks like on mobile because most people are going to view your website on mobile. So that right there is like an easy fix. Like overnight, you're going to get more leads that way. Secondly, you need to advertise what's going to be different about you. You have to have a point of difference. You're probably, because you're a new school without financial aid, you're probably half the price of your competitor. That can be attractive, but no one has $10,000 cash. And when I say no one, I mean 8 out of 10 of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So you are going to be enrolling people who don't have $10,000. You need to find third-party financiers, period. You cannot say it's up to you or like, okay, we'll do in-house payments because what's going to happen is they're going to graduate and never talk to you again. So you need to work with third-party financiers to make sure you can help get those people funded. And then after you have that figured out, talk with me at Beauty Schools Directory because we get so many leads every month in every area. And we are a cheap alternative for people or just an additional source of leads where you don't have to spend $5,000 a month on Google ads. You could spend $500 a month and get 20 to 25 leads guaranteed every single month. So I hope that answers your question. Let's talk a little bit then about marketing budget. When you're coming up with your marketing budget, if you don't have a huge budget, or even if you have $50,000 a month, like you should be spending almost all of it on digital today in 2022. The number one thing people do when they're looking for anything is they Google it, period. They Google everything. And so you need to be running Google ads. If you need help with that, reach out to me and we can help you or I can put you in touch with the right people to help you with your budget. But Google ads is really the number one thing you should be doing before anything. You need to be spending money on digital media and you need to have realistic expectations about that. If you reach out to a lead, they're not going to call you back or answer right away. You have to call them over and over again. You have to text them. I prefer you text them, several times in that first week until you get a hold of them. So don't just think the first time, oh, they didn't answer, they're not interested, this is a crappy lead. And I talk with new schools who think that too, right? Anthony, give everyone here like the lowdown on realistic expectations with how much people suck at answering their phone or texting you back.
So yeah, when I started out as an admissions rep, that was the only way. You had to call.
Yeah.
But now you have to text them, you have to message them, you have to, and you're not being rude. Like I used to say this all the time to my admissions reps, don't sell this the way you would want to buy it, meaning don't feel like you're being pushy. or you're being annoying, because if you're not, you're never going to get these people to respond. And at some point, they felt the interest to reach out to you to find out. So you're not cold calling them. They are a warm or even a hot lead. Sometimes they're just non-responsive. I mean, anybody who has young kids, I have, a 17, 16, and a 15-year-old, and I know that to get them to come downstairs for dinner, I have to call them and text them 3 times.
Yeah.
So, and that's in the same house. Forget about wanting them to come to beauty school. So yeah, you realistically, I think the number is probably somewhere around 7 or 8 times where you even can really feasibly get any kind of real response with it.
Yeah.
You probably know better than numbers, but you have to be persistent. And I can't tell you how many times I've had a graduate at graduation come to me and say, Mr. Anthony, I want to thank you so much for being a pain in the ass and being persistent, because I never would have come here. If you hadn't called me to change my life, because when I called you, I was down and out, or when I called you, I was this, or I was that. So you don't know how you're affecting them. You don't know what is going on in their life. And sometimes they need, and more often than not in our student population, that is what it is.
Yeah.
They need somebody to kind of just give them that little extra nudge, right? We don't have traditional students come to our schools. They're non-traditional students with non-traditional problems, although I feel like everybody has the same problems these days, but that's the reality. So be persistent.
Yeah. Yes, be persistent. And as far as a benchmark for that, like for BSD leads specifically, if a contact rate should be around 40 to 50%. So probably about 40% of the people will be extremely responsive with you. With your own leads that come to your website, probably a little higher, 60 to 70%. But the fact is 100% of the people that fill out a form, it's not like you're going to be able to get a hold of them. That's just not, it's just not realistic. And you can't assume that. Sometimes people are shopping multiple schools. So they filled out a form on your website and Paul Mitchell and Aveda. And so they have 3 different people calling them and they're just like, oh my God, leave me alone. Like, I'm not interested. Or they just completely ghost you. So the best approach is to call first. If they don't answer, send them a text message. But they're more likely to respond to your text message if you call first. There are studies that show that. And they do that because they're afraid you're going to call them back. So they're like, oh, let me just text her back because I don't want her to call me, because people don't want to talk on the phone. That doesn't mean you shouldn't call. And you should be, if you are an owner on this call and your rep is telling you, I'm not calling anyone because no one answers the phone call, you tell them you need to call first, period. Because talking on the phone is better than texting. You can build rapport better and you can push them to a tour faster. And so the very first point of contact should always be a phone call. But if they don't answer, you text immediately.
And if they don't recognize your phone number, they'll never answer it because they think you're selling them your extended car warranty.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't answer. So, but if they follow up immediately with a text from that same number,
yeah,
and say, hi, Jen, this is Anthony from Long Island Beauty School, blah, 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 whatever your pitch is.
Yes, exactly.
Just to get them on a call with you. And I will tell you. I think
it's funny that you didn't. Yeah, I think it's funny you didn't finish that text message, because everyone does have different best practices for what that should be. But let me just tell you what it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, this is Anthony from Long Island Beauty School. When can you talk on the phone? Don't say that.
Yeah, you're leaving it up to them and they're going to say no.
Yeah, exactly. Just ask them a question. Just ask them, like, seriously, just ask them, how long have you been thinking about going to school? Are you interested in day or night classes? We offer cosmetology and aesthetics. Are you more interested in hair or skin? Just very simple questions that get them to respond. The goal of a text is a response. And then the second goal is a tour, period. That's the goal. The goal of you reaching out to leads is to get a tour. And if you can get a tour, about half of those people should enroll. That should be a good overall benchmark for you.
That's selling the dream. When they get to your building and they get to see what's going on, that's tangible to them. Now they're looking at other people smiling, enjoying, and loving what they're doing. It's the beauty industry. Why could you not?
Yes, yes, at least hopefully. Hopefully your students are happy and you walk around and they're in a great mood and everyone's friendly. So I think that's great. Let me ask you
That's what I
about,
opened with.
we have a few minutes left. I want to ask you about financial aid. I feel like a lot of benchmarks fall on admissions. And then FA can be just like kind of not great. Oh, sorry, you didn't qualify for the full payout. Ooh, most people get $5,500. You only got to that. Their delivery cannot be great sometimes. And I feel like admissions then gets, kind of in trouble for it, or they don't get the credit for it. So I want to ask you, how do we hold financial aid just as responsible?
This was a huge problem, right? So especially when you're training and you're training to be compliant, an admissions rep is sales, right? We established that. They are selling the dream. The financial aid rep is the one that is paying for it.
Yep.
They have to be equally enthusiastic and encouraging for that end goal. You hit the nail on the head. They can't say, oh, you didn't qualify for a Pell Grant. It should be, congratulations. You and your family have enough money that you don't need a Pell Grant. You know,
Yes.
there's different ways to say that, but that's the reality of it, is that they have to be as enthusiastic and take whatever may be. There really shouldn't be a reason why you should lose somebody to financing. That's the reality. And it's financing. And if somebody has a problem with saying that they want it all for free in a grant, there's a whole sales spin for that, right? So it's, you have to have skin in the game for your education. This is your future. If you went to college, you would spend $50,000 for an associate's degree. We're talking about you spending $10,000 for a career, or $15,000
where you get to work within 6 months, or like immediately, right? And that is how if I'm in financial aid, that's how I'm spinning it. Great news. You just qualified for a student loan and you don't even have to start paying that back till 6 months after you graduate.
Right.
Wasn't that great?
So here's the other thing, that a lot of times the two do not act as a cohesive team.
Yeah.
And this is where first of all, the appointment is always the admissions rep's appointment, even if it's for financial aid. This is my opinion of it. The admissions rep controls that point of entry. They should be the first person they see, then go to financial aid. And when they're done with financial aid, they should be walked back over to the admissions office and say, Jen's done. Would you like to speak with her? And say, yes. Sit down. Jen, how did it go? How do you feel about your financing package? Because sometimes they might be too embarrassed to tell the financial aid person, I didn't qualify for this, or I can't afford that, whatever it is. It's like sitting down at the BMW dealership and saying, you know what, I really wanted a 7 Series, but I can't afford it. I just walk out. Mm-hmm. I want to know if you can't afford it, or maybe there's something I can do. There's probably nothing you can do, but sometimes there is. Sometimes you can go to the dean or the owner of the school and say, is there anything we can do? Can we extend the payments upon, further than graduation? There's always something to do. Maybe there's a grant that's out there, or a scholarship that your financial aid person isn't looking at. So they need to always start and end that entry into that building with the admissions rep.
I am picking up what you're throwing down. I'm with you. In fact, financial aid should be walking people out of their office and literally sitting the person back down in front of the admissions person and saying, hey, we got Jen all packaged. She's ready to go. She's ready to sign her paperwork. It just needs to be a nice little handoff like that. And there needs to be cohesiveness with FA and admissions, period. And if there's a war in your school, first of all, you're not alone. This is the number one thing admissions people tell me. It's the number one thing, is their financial aid is ruining their sales. And so what you need to do as an owner is you need to have team building, like send them bowling, like send them curling, send them wherever, and get them. I'm all about curling now. I curled for the first time and I'm a pro. So I'm going to say, send them curling.
As of this week, it's golfing too.
This week it's golfing. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Next week it'll be rowing when you come back from Europe.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Who knows what I'll be doing. Yes, so that needs to be, I mean, there needs to be the cohesiveness there, because there is a war in beauty school, and not just beauty schools, all schools. Admissions are really good salespeople, and then financial aid are sometimes like these dry, boring people that don't know how to talk. You need to get your financial aid people sales trained, customer service trained. Probably more so than your admissions, because the number one hurdle to someone going to your school is always finances, always. And so that should be where you focus a lot of your energy as a school, to train up FA and make sure you have every resource. Like Anthony said, make sure you've done your research on all the scholarships in the industry. We have one at BSD. Beauty Changes Lives has a ton for schools. There's a lot of schools. There's a lot of associations out there, different product lines, and people can get scholarships. So make sure you do your research to help people in that way. The last question I have for you is, what ways can you reward admissions for hitting benchmarks if you can't give bonuses? We miss bonuses.
I know, I missed it. When I started out, I got paid $18,200 a year salary, and then $50 a start and $50 a grad. Nice. That was a lot of money. That was a lot of money back then. So,
yeah.
So I think it goes back to, again, if you want to be a successful school owner, unfortunately in today's regulatory climate, it's really difficult to give anything, incentivize them in any way. So it really kind of needs to be about a core team, right? Everybody needs to be rewarded some way, whether it's a company night out, a Saturday barbecue or a Sunday barbecue. It's just about building morale. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you have to be really careful about giving any monetary gifts out there for them. But there's no reason why you can't take them out to dinner and just make them feel good and special. Maybe but it has to be parity across the school. So we used to do this a lot. We would take our director out, because and maybe the top performing instructor. We would do metrics on every teacher. How many students dropped out of your program? How many students had, we used to do quarterly and monthly reports on feedback from the students. Do you like your teacher? What do you like about your teacher? What do you like about their lesson plans? Unfortunately, it's a full-time gig assessing all that information, but that's the way you reward them. You take out 3 or 4 people at a time, send them to an event. If there's an ACTS event, AACS event, that's a great way to incentivize them. So if there's a great admissions training, a beauty schools director is going to be at the AACS annual, you want to tell your admissions reps, hey, you meet this goal and you're going to, I don't know where it is this year. I think it might be New Orleans.
Yeah.
So you know what? People get excited about that. And it's a goal for them as a team to want to get there. I would do that for the CEA and my instructors and say, I'm watching how many students drop out of your class, how many graduate out of your class. And that's okay to incentivize that way if you're doing it with a real methodology on how to do it without saying, hey, admissions.
Yeah.
Here's a trip to Vegas if you enroll 100 students this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. I think trips are a really great way to incentivize. I think a flexible schedule. Hey, you can take every other Friday off, or, just whatever, just making sure that, you don't burn out admissions, because right now I'm seeing it on LinkedIn. Everyone's looking for admissions reps, and admissions, they're leaving their jobs for sales jobs because they realize, like, I can get commission. I'm a good salesperson. And so if you have a good admissions person, you need to pay them very well. And you need to give them perks because they're hard to keep, and they will go use their talents where they can get commission. They'll become a real estate agent.
Yeah.
This has been a super fun chat. Thank you all for joining us. It's at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up, and we're going to have Anthony on some future webinars. If you guys want to meet us in person, we're going to be at the Annapolis events this year. The next one is in Arlington, Virginia at the end of June. We are both going to be there. We have a booth. We would love to meet with you in person. We're also going to be at AACS in New Orleans in October. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks as always for having me.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.